let's talk about food. What do you do with your food? So after all my research, I decided to go with the Ursack. This was foolproof for me. I knew that after I watched all the videos of people trying to hang their bear lines in bad weather, in areas where there weren't a lot of good trees and things like that, I knew that this was going to be the best thing for me. It was simple. You just tie it around a tree. Bigfoot on the trail, or I think that's his channel. He has a great video that shows you about how to tie the knots and the best way to hang it. I highly suggest if you go with an Ursack that you look at his video, because I thought it was spot on. And he talks about what's great about the Ursack and everything else. You use it with these OpSack odor-proof bags. I had a challenge with these. I didn't think they were super durable. Always they're like a Ziploc bag sort of, but way more thick and odor-proof. I always had issues with this part here eventually breaking down and ripping, so I had to keep ordering new ones, and it was kind of a pain. But you need to use this with the bag, because that's what deters rodents and critters and bears from getting into your food. So it was very good in that regard. So that's what I loved about it, the simplicity. I could just throw it on a tree anywhere. I didn't have to worry about it. If other people were hanging stuff, I might throw it up on their hang, but I didn't have to hang it. Foolproof, right? Okay, the cons to this. I mentioned this bag having to be replaced, but Cup of Tea had this bag, and she didn't have to replace hers as much as I did. The other thing I didn't like about this was, like, once you get all your food in there and you get this in here, this is like this big cylinder that you stick in your pack. So you lose sort of the ability to, like, move things around and take up the air pockets, if you will, in your pack, because it just ends up being this big thing and you can't tuck it really, because everything's in this bag and then it's in this bag. The other cons to this is it weighs more than, a food bag that you hang in your tree. And in bad weather, it gets wet. This can freeze, and it takes a while to get it off of the tree. And when this gets wet, it gets heavier. So it's heavier when it's dry, and then it's even heavier when it gets wet. So I eventually decided to send this home. So I went with a Z-Packs large food bag, because I needed to make sure my food bag could hold, a decent food carry, 4 days maybe if I had to, 5 in some cases, not really much 5, but 3 or 4. So I went with this, and then I would use my OpSack in this. A lot of people have these. I suggest you do something on your bag to differentiate it from other people's. I put this little thing that my Smart Wool socks would come in. I would just tie this on the end of it so that I knew it was mine. So I used it with this. Again, this forced everything to be in this cylinder shape, and it was difficult to, like, really sort of push it down in my pack and take up the air space. So I ended up not using these after a certain point. I was done with that. So I ended up with this, and I liked it a lot. It comes with string. This string isn't the greatest. I found I would get sort of like rope burns on my hands sometimes if my food bag was heavy and I was trying to pull it up. You couldn't really get a good grip, so I would recommend looking into other cording maybe. And this carabiner also. I'm not going to show you how to hang a bag. There's plenty of other people that do that on videos, but I used this carabiner for 2 things. So another piece of equipment that had dual function. I used this to carry my Crocs on the outside of my backpack, and I also used it for my food bag when I was hanging my food bag. So this was the carabiner I used. I I liked this when I got rid of the op sack bag, because then when I have my food in my pack, I was able to squish it down and my food was able to sort of go into the little crevices and air pockets, and it just made it so from a volume standpoint, packing my pack, I was able to really consolidate things well. This held what I needed for food, and it was a good option. What I will say is, if you go this route, practice, practice, practice as much as you can on how to hang them. I was very, very fortunate. Bearded Frog, Cup of Tea, Chief even at one point tried to show me how to do this. I was terrible with hanging my food bag. There were actually some hangs that I think Cup called pathetic, as she laughed. I did a bad job. I lost the little bag that holds the rocks because it got stuck in the trees. There were times when I spent the better part of 40 minutes or more trying to hang my food. So just practice if you're going to go that route, because it can be very frustrating and it can be very time consuming. And in bad weather, you don't want to be out there for 40 minutes in the rain trying to hang your food. And that's when the op sack would have been nice to have. But it was a trade-off. To me, it was about having a more lightweight option that would fit in my pack better. So, you decide. Let's talk about water filtration. This is a very critical thing. I never drank water that was unfiltered. I never, ever wanted to experience Giardia, and thankfully I did not. I used the Sawyer Squeeze. This is a very popular water filter on the AT. There were also people who use the Katadyn, maybe, the squeezy bag. I'll talk about what was nice about that. So I used this. I started out not with this top, but I started out with this top. You can see I got Luco tape on it. So this was great. I liked this top best. However, I can't tell you how many broken off tops I found on the side of the trail. These caps eventually, from overuse, break off and fall on the ground. I ended up using Luco tape. Let me tell you, that stuff's better than duct tape. I ended up using Luco tape to keep that on, but eventually it was just such a pain, because whenever I was filtering, it would do this, then the water wouldn't get in my bottle, and then I'd flip it back, and then the thing would start to fall off. It was just a pain, so I ended up switching to this cap, just because that's what I had. But this was my favorite setup, this top that flipped open, because it has a wide opening, so you got a better water flow out of it with this. And I would use this. I kept it in a Ziploc bag in my backpack. I didn't use the gravity method of filtering water. I just filtered it and I would go. So I used a 1 liter smart water bottle that I carried in my side pocket, and then I had the smaller one. I think I don't know if it's 750 milliliters or something, that went in my pocket right here. And it was a squeezy smart water bottle. That's what I used. I will say I would have preferred the Katadyn if it weren't so collapsible. The bag, the filter, the convenience of that system is amazing. People would just go up to a stream, fill it with water, and keep going. They didn't have to do what I did, which was take off my pack, get my CNOC bag. Oh, let me grab my CNOC bag. I used the CNOC bag with my Sawyer Squeeze. So what I had to do to get water was take off my pack, fill this bag with water, and then close it up. You can see I put an old shoelace on the bottom. It just makes it easier to carry up and down the hills when you get water at the end of the day. So I recommend just adding something on there so that you can hang it, or if you do the gravity. I'd screw this on, and then I would stand there and squeeze it into my water bottle. It took time. It's kind of a pain, but that was what I ended up going with. The nice thing about that other option, the Katadyn, was the convenience. But I also didn't really have a place, because of the design of my backpack that I had, where I could stuff that collapsible bottle. It wasn't going to go into my pocket here that I had for my smart water bottle. And I had things already assigned to all my pockets. So it really wasn't going to work for me. So I ended up going with this. It was good. Like I said, the other is just more convenient to use. I saw a lot of people doing different variations with a Sawyer squeeze. Some people would have a clean bottle and a dirty bottle. So they'd have two. And they would put this on top of their dirty bottle, and they would use this to drink out of. That just didn't work for me. Again, this goes into the category of personal preferences, where you kind of got to try stuff out to see what works for you and what you like best, because not everyone is the same. The other thing I would say, do not underestimate the value of cleaning your water filter. Wow. I had this one filter last me for the entire 5 months of my Thru Hike. And that's because every time I had a chance, if I was at a hostel, a hotel, whatever, I would clean out, backflush my filter. I had people blown away by the flow of my filter because I cleaned it so often. I had good flow. What good flow means is less time spent filtering water because it flows faster. So I highly recommend that you backflush your water filter on a regular basis, like at least once a week or once every couple weeks at the most. And when you're backflushing, make sure you're doing this to loosen up all the stuff that gets stuck inside there, because you'd be amazed at how much more stuff comes out after you've done that and you backflush it. A lot of people don't like to carry this. You can find them at hostels a lot of the time, but not all the time. And if you end up staying in hotels or anything like that, you're not going to have this. I ended up carrying mine the entire time. Sorry. I didn't carry it to start because of that advice. Then I found one in a hiker box, I think at the NOC, and then I carried it with me the rest of the way, because the value of having a clean filter was huge, and it's so lightweight. To me, it made sense. So that's what I did for water. Okay, let's talk about something fun. Cook stove. I call that fun because who does not like to eat when they are through hiking? I loved it. Okay, I went with the MSR Pocket Rocket with the igniter. This thing was great. It was small and it worked every time, the entire time. I know I'd read reviews where people said that the igniter switch failed on them. So I brought a lighter along with me as a backup to light it. But you don't really even need to carry a lighter if you're around other people, because someone else can light your stove with their stove. You just turn on the gas and they come over and it lights. But this igniter switch was fabulous. Worked every time. I used the small propane, and sometimes I carried two if I needed to, but most of the time I was able to just get away with one. This thing was awesome. Highly recommend it. And it's compact, easy to pack up. I saw a decent amount of them. There's a lot of different stoves out there. I didn't want to mess with alcohol, the alcohol stoves. There was nothing else out there that I wanted to be bothered with. This seemed like quick, easy, and very lightweight. So that worked for me. Then I went with the Snow Peak stove. It also came with a cup that was probably about that big. I decided I didn't need the cup. I thought about what I was going to use the stove for, and it became apparent that I didn't need the cup that it came with. So I just carried this with the cover, and I ripped up a bandana, and I used this as sort of my cook cloth. You can see it used to be white. It's really gross, and this is clean. So I would use this to grab onto my handles because they got hot when it got heated. I would use this to wipe out moisture, or like after I have a tea in the morning, I'd just wipe it out. Then I would, and that's pretty much all I would use it for. I cooked ramen in it a couple times, but I didn't like having to clean my pot in cold weather, because then I'd have to like warm up water, and it was just a pain. So I decided to go the route that I'd seen other people do to cook ramen, and I would put it in a quart-sized freezer Ziploc bag, and that's what I would put my ramen in and add my hot water to. I also made this little koozie out of this material that I bought a roll of at like Home Depot, and duct tape. This little koozie was awesome. I used it almost every day because I would make my tea, and then when I took my pot off of my stove, I would put it in here, and then I could hold it and keep it in my tent. And I could put it on my tent floor, and it wouldn't melt anything. It protected everything around me from getting burnt or anything like that. So I would use that, and I would put my tea in it. And then when I cooked my ramen, I put the Ziploc bag in this, and then I folded the top over the edges, and I put my ramen in there with my flavor packet. It actually smells like ramen. And then I'd pour my hot water in there, and then I'd take my cover and put it on top of this to help steam it to cook. And it worked great. So this was a nice little handy thing that I made. And I bought one of these Sea to Summit titanium spoons. Now, I saw a hack on somebody else's YouTube. I wish I could remember, because I'd love to give them credit for it, where they marked their water measurement on the spoon. Brilliant. Can I just tell you, I didn't have to try and look inside or outside my cup to figure out what the water line was. This is 1 cup, this is 2. Most of the freeze-dried meals were 1 1/3 cups of water. Some were 2 cups of water. I stuck this in here. I poured the water in, and I was able to see the water level right on my spoon that I marked with a Sharpie. And it was so easy. I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many times I saw other people messing around with trying to figure out the water to boil for their dehydrated meals or whatever. And all I had to do was stick my spoon in here, pour in the water, and I was done. So whoever came up with that hack, I do wish I remembered. That's what I would use. It was great. And this spoon was awesome. I used this. I didn't need a spork. I don't think you need a spork. I think a spoon is good for everything. When you're eating noodles, you can press them against the side to cut them smaller. It just gets everything. It works for Nutella. It works for peanut butter. It works for ice cream. And it's super lightweight. And I used to put all of this stuff in my little Hyperlight cinch sack, because I felt like this was a good way to keep it separate and all together. So I would put I'll show you how I packed it in case you actually care. I put this in first. Then I would take my little pocket rocket, and nestle that in there. And I'd stuff that in like that. I'd put this on the top, and then I'd stick this in my bag. Like I said, I did carry a lighter for a while, but then the lighter stopped working, so I just got rid of it. And I put my little propane on top. I put my spoon in there. And there's my stove kit. So that worked out awesome. Very happy with this. It worked in all the crappy weather that we had.